I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And this week we're going to be looking at the newly announced Oscar shortlists that came out this afternoon, and talk about some snubs, some surprises, and what they ultimately mean for the Oscars and what they can tell us about what is actually going to happen at the Oscars. Wanted to do a dedicated video about this because, yes, we talk about the big award shows and some of the other ones like Golden Globe and Critics' Choice, but the heart of this series is to do a deep dive on the technical categories. Not a lot of Oscar channels do that. We've been doing it now for over 8 years, and we pride ourselves, and I pride myself, in terms of figuring out the details of the best editing category or VFX. And I know the real Oscar fans are really interested in these categories just as much as the acting categories. So if you're new to the channel, what I do every single week is talk about award shows. In particular, I break down each and every Oscar category, do a deep dive, sometimes their own video, sometimes multiple categories in a video, but for the most part spend 10-15 minutes at the very least on every category, my thoughts, my predictions, what I think is going to get nominated, as well as a couple of possible contenders. Now we're kind of in the thick of Oscar season, so we're going to have a dedicated video, let's say like this one, just to some of the news that's happening. But there's still some categories that we haven't discussed that we will be, which is why the kind of schedule is all over the place. So actually this Friday, I'm going to be doing a video on the kind of design categories: costume design, makeup design, production design. Then the next Monday, I'm thinking about maybe doing something with documentaries. Then I may update my Best Picture predictions. So there are going to be multiple videos a week for the next few weeks here. So I highly recommend you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a video. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Oscar shortlist in the comments down below, or your thoughts on anything related to the Oscars. That's why I do these videos, to create an awesome film-going, Oscar-loving community, which we have on this channel, so I really do appreciate your guys' support. But without further ado, let's talk about 3 snubs and 3 surprises from my perspective for the Oscar shortlist that happened this afternoon. Starting off with the snubs, my number one biggest snub, I think, was the documentary Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve story, not getting shortlisted for Best Documentary. Now, I never really thought that this was going to get nominated. You cover the Oscars for enough years, you figure out the types of movies that the documentary branch in particular don't like to nominate. I think I was maybe offended by it when a movie like Won't You Be My Neighbor doesn't get nominated for Best Documentary. But when you see this kind of happen year over year, these kind of more populist type documentaries, more talking head documentaries, oftentimes these documentaries about famous people that are very well liked amongst the public, they almost never get nominated at the documentary branch. Now, it's still a snub because it was doing quite well in terms of nominations at other award shows like Critics' Choice Awards, Cinema Eye, PGA got in, so it was nominated at multiple awards groups, precursor awards groups in the documentary category. So the fact that it wasn't nominated here, I think once again gives us that assurance that the documentary branch in particular doesn't like the more popular type movies. Even a movie like Will and Harper, which did get shortlisted here, I wouldn't be predicting that for the Oscars. I'd be more willing to predict a movie like Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which is like a more experimental 2.5 hour, no talking head, just using news footage type of a documentary. They're more artsy in that way. They're more interested in the experimental within the documentary genre. So it was a snub here. Even though I wasn't going to predict it, I do think a lot of people were considering it as a potential top 5 contender just because of how many precursors in terms of nominations that it got. But it is the classic example of the documentary that they don't like. So I think looking forward to making your own predictions. Superman, that more populist type of celebrity documentary, is almost the same situation as a movie like Will and Harper. You're going to see a lot of people predict Will and Harper for Best Documentary. Hey, maybe I predict it myself and it goes in for documentary, but that's not the type of documentary that they like. They're a little bit more artsy. They're a little bit more interested in the experimentation of the genre, which is why I was never going to predict Super/Man, and I probably won't predict a movie like Will and Harper. One of those things to keep in mind, that the fact that this didn't get nominated is ultimately a confirmation to us and a signal to us of what their taste is. Then another snub I want to talk about is Saturday Night. This is really just a confirmation that the movie's chances for the Oscars are dead. I mean, I remember at TIFF back in September, we thought that maybe it would get in for Best Picture. I never predicted it myself, but I know it was a topic of conversation. So the fact that this was number 8 on Gold Derby and then didn't even make the Oscar shortlist, I think is a testament to the fact that this movie is dead. It probably won't have any Oscar nominations, very likely, and just didn't resonate the way people thought it would, even in a category like score with a really kind of upbeat, in-your-face kind of interesting Jean-Baptiste score, who's also really well-liked within the Academy. So something to keep in mind that Saturday night, definitely, if you have it on any of your predictions, I would probably remove it. And then the other snub, I think, would just be generally the substance. I know people were kind of really excited about the movie because it overperformed at the Golden Globes, but it overperformed at Critics' Choice Awards. But, that's why we always wait for kind of industry awards or, the Academy itself giving the shortlists to kind of put the, things in perspective. On one hand, it got nominated for makeup, which it needed to, and it did. So it was still a good sign that it got shortlisted there. But, it didn't overperform. I thought that maybe it could get in for VFX or maybe for sound or maybe for score, but very unlikely in those categories. And it didn't overperform. It didn't surprise and get shortlisted there. So I do think the best way to think about the substance is still an above-the-line kind of a movie. I'm somewhat confident it gets in for screenplay. I think it can get in for director. I think Demi Moore can get it in. And if those things happen, then I think it also gets in for picture, rather than, let's say, a makeup and sound. It's more of an above-the-line kind of a movie, rather than like an everything everywhere all at once sweeping, super well-liked movie. It still is a fringe Best Picture contender. I think these Oscar shortlists just confirm that. Now discussing some of the surprises from the Oscar shortlists. The first one that jumped out to me is Blitz. I thought that it would probably get in for sound and probably get in for song, but I was surprised that it even got in for those two and Best Original Score. I think that it always felt to me as, at the beginning of the year, maybe an Oscar contender, but it always felt to me after we saw the movie that it was still be well respected from a celebrated director to get considered in these technical nominations. So I wouldn't be surprised if Blitz gets a couple of nominations at Oscar morning. I'm not predicting it as of right now, but going into the Oscar shortlist, I thought there's a chance Blitz gets 0. I mean, it got no nominations at the Golden Globes. It got 1 nomination for Best Young Performer at Critics' Choice Awards. It got pretty much blanked out at both of those award shows. So the fact that it's still in the conversation, it's not like a Saturday night where it's completely dead. It's still in the conversation, and I wouldn't be shocked if it got a song nomination or even a costumes nomination on Oscar morning. It could resonate to, particularly the craft of the movie is so excellent, it could resonate to a lot of below-the-line categories. And I think it's a testament to the fact that I wouldn't have been surprised if it didn't get in for song or it didn't get in for sound. So the fact that it got in for both of those and, performed well there, and then definitely overperformed, in my opinion, in terms of getting a score nomination. It had a strong nominations morning here, a shortlist morning. It's just as a sign that this movie is still in the conversation for potential Oscars. Then my second surprise is going to go to Alien Romulus, which was actually probably my biggest personal surprise on Oscar shortlist afternoon here, just because I thought I was probably going to get in for visual effects, and then was really surprised that I got in for that, but also sound, but also score. I think just because of the Academy's general aversion to horror movies, generally they haven't been appreciative of that. Just the fact that past Alien movies like Alien Covenant or Prometheus haven't been big Oscar movies. Surprised to see it show up in 3 separate categories here. Now, what can we kind of tell from that? It got in for, shortlisted for score. It got shortlisted for sound. I don't think it's going to get in either of those 2 categories, but what it does tell us overall is that this movie is still pretty well liked. Like, I remember last year, the Oscar shortlist, a lot of people were surprised that Napoleon got so many shortlists. Now, it didn't get in every single category, but what it was is an indication that people really liked Napoleon. And what happened on Oscar nominations morning? It got in for costume design, it got in for production design, it generally overperformed. So when you take a look at a movie like Alien Romulus, the fact that it got in for 3 categories, you don't say, okay, I guess I'm going to predict it now for score and sound. It's probably not going to happen. But what it does tell you is that there is general overall support from multiple branches, that this movie is still a well-liked movie. So in a category where it is kind of competitive in my mind, with visual effects, where it's probably a 5, 6, 7 slot right now, the fact that we got some confirmations from other branches that they also like it indicate to me that there's a strong opinion of this movie within the Academy, which will help us understand the best visual effects category. So when trying to figure out that kind of fifth slot, of course we'll have to figure out what happens with the bake-off with the VFX, but this tells me that Alien Romulus could be a potential Oscar contender, in particular for the best visual effects category. And then my final surprise of the afternoon was, we'll call them overlaps. That is to say, Flo and Dahomey. It used to be not that long ago where if you were nominated for Best International Feature or Best Foreign Language Feature back then, you couldn't get nominated in any other category. It was kind of a faux pas. But now we see that be pretty common with movies like Honeyland or Flea get nominated in International Feature and Documentary, or International Feature and Animated Feature. And we're seeing that already with some of the shortlists here, where a movie like Flo, I think, is likely to get nominated for Best Animated Feature, but the fact that Latvia has submitted it in International Feature, I think gives more credence to the fact that, okay, it's going to get nominated for Animated Feature likely, and it got shortlisted here for International Feature, maybe gets a dual nomination, just because if a movie is really well liked, the Academy has shown us in past years that they're more willing to nominate it in multiple categories. Same thing with Dahomey. I think definitely a stronger contender in Documentary, has been doing well at a lot of the precursors, and the fact that it got in for International Feature as well as a shortlist shows kind of overall support for the movie. So can definitely, I think, get in for Documentary. I probably would include it in my predictions. But then International Feature, maybe it's a consideration too. Maybe that is that fifth slot where we kind of feel confident with See the Sacred Fig, I'm Still Here, and then Emilia Perez, and then maybe the fourth, fifth slot can go to a whole host of movies. So maybe the fact that we know a movie like Dahomey is appreciated by multiple branches is an indicator that, or indicative that it could be a real contender in two categories. So I think the overlaps of Flo and Dahomey, the fact that they got multiple category nominations, generally is a good sign for both of those movies. More so with Dahomey in Documentary Film, more so in Flo with Animated Feature to kind of give us that guarantee that it's probably going to get nominated. But still interesting facts nonetheless. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this quick video. Like I said, stay tuned to this week, Friday. There's going to be another video, and then probably Monday, and then probably Thursday. So subscribe to the channel so you just make sure you are notified every time I upload a video. And that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.